Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we've actually got to talk about Reddit because Reddit just decided to commit suicide. Now, hear me out here. I'm not saying that Reddit is going to completely die or go away, but it will fundamentally change, and I think they're going to lose a ton of users, more so than they are predicting. Now, I know I'm going to hear basically from this from people that read the title of this video or podcast and say, Nick, you're an idiot, and here's why. But hear me out here. Now, first things first, I'm cribbing some of this from John Herman of the Intelligencer, and I thought that he had an excellent write-up on this, so I'm paraphrasing and cribbing him from a little bit because I think this is the foundation of exactly what's going on. And he wrote a ton more than what I'm cribbing from, but this is a good primer. And here's what's going on if you don't know. You might have heard of Reddit, you might not be a regular user of Reddit, but I promise you, if you're Googling, you've seen Reddit links. Now, this past Monday, thousands of the largest communities on Reddit actually went private. They effectively removed themselves from the site. Now, immediately, Reddit became less interesting and honestly less useful. And that is absolutely true. In my own life, I belong to one of those communities. I am not a big Redditor. I do not go back and forth. I do not really post. It's more me looking up information to do videos like this, as there are groups about tech news, privacy news, cybersecurity news, etc., that I peruse to find interesting things to talk about with you. So by virtue of that, one of the most interesting ones that I usually go to is now closed, and I can't get to it, which means I lost a major source of essentially resources for research as we are talking here. Now, interestingly enough, though, Google also became less interesting and less useful as one of the biggest searchable repositories of content made by humans, that would be Reddit, including millions of user-generated questions and answers. Reddit basically essentially started in 2005 as a link aggregator with the goal of being the front page of the internet, had actually become one of Google's core infrastructure responses when you go searching. Now, the Blackout was organized in a protest of Reddit's plan to charge developers for access to its data, which could have the effect of killing a range of tools and apps used by Reddit's volunteer moderators and some of its most devoted users and contributors. That's right. You can start essentially like a Reddit board yourself or a Reddit community yourself on whatever it is, and we've seen them all across the spectrum, from political, there were some for Donald Trump, some against Donald Trump, to tech news, to you name it. You like underwater basket weaving, there's a Reddit community, and there's a moderator that is not getting paid to do that work because he or she just loves underwater basket weaving. Now, Reddit's position on this essentially is that third-party apps, including the popular Reddit browsers like Apollo, that basically aim to prove the experience of using the site, are costing Reddit money while undermining its business model and functioning as competitors, if you will. This echoes, interestingly enough, Elon Musk and Twitter and his justifications for essentially a similar move over there. We've talked about the verification system, charging for APIs. Elon Musk wanted to charge something like $42,000 for APIs, which basically kills a lot of the advertisers out there saying, I cannot afford to do that, or the research institutions that don't have the money that are doing things like looking at, let's say, anger and political machinations, et cetera, and disinformation on Twitter. They're now losing that ability because of that high charge. Now, in the process of becoming essentially a pillar of our online life, Reddit never turned a profit, which I actually found interesting. I didn't know. But now its leadership obviously needs that to change, and they're essentially running out of patience. In a leaked memo addressing this debacle, CEO Steve Huffman assured staffers that, quote, like all blowups on Reddit, this one will pass as well. And he also added that this basically hasn't had a significant revenue impact on Twitter as well. Now, as the blackout has stretched on, some communities reopened, for the record, a couple of days after they had initially planned, but a lot of them actually have remained closed. And by virtue of that, Huffman's tone is starting to harden. In an interview with The Verge, Huffman began by describing Reddit as a, quote, platform built by its users. And then he went on to compare it basically to a city. Quote, we're a platform and tech company on one hand, but on the other, it's a living organism. This democratic living organism created by its users. Now, pressed on the protest over this new API policy, he quickly said, and I quote, that's our business decision. We're not undoing that business decision. And by the end of the conversation, he had left essentially the concept of the city entirely behind. And I quote, 90+% of Reddit users are on our platform contributing and are monetized either through ads or Reddit Premium. Why would we subsidize this small group? Why would we effectively pay them to use Reddit but not everybody else? who also contributes to Reddit. Does that make sense? These people who are mad, they're mad because they're going to get something for free, and now it's not going to be free. And that free comes at the expense of our other users and our business. That's what this is about. It can't be free, end quote. Also, in an interview with NBC News, Huffman accused volunteer moderators of subverting the actual will of Reddit's overall users, who he suggested increasingly sympathize with his position. Now, he called the protesting of moderators the quote-unquote landed gentry of the basically the quote people who get there first who get there first get to stay there and pass it down to their descendants, and it's not democratic. Now, Mr. Huffman basically is stretching, obviously, in a variety of ways here. It's a multifaceted argument that he's trying to make that encompasses many different umbrellas. But Reddit is not a feudal government. This is according to, the author here, which, I think is absolutely correct. It's not a city in any sense. Neither is it really democratic, as Huffman says. What it is an advertising and subscription-supported web service that also depends on free content and unpaid labor from its users. Essentially, what you're talking about at its core, it's in the same umbrella and business as Meta, aka Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. You're giving something basically to the people to use essentially for free, and then they're the product. You're monetizing them based on time and attention because essentially you're data mining them. So if I start talking about underwater basket weaving, the advertisers that are plugged into Reddit say, Nick is into underwater basket weaving, and guess what advertising I get? Just like on Facebook, if I'm in a Facebook group for underwater basket weaving. But Hoffman's mixed metaphors on top of that do tell a story. As similar as its underlying business model may be, Reddit somehow feels different than other social media competitors. It simply contributes something different to the internet around it. And that, I think, is an incredibly true statement. Rather than prioritizing individual profiles, it emphasizes communities and their posts. This is something I think that Facebook groups never really just understood in a way of contribution and collaboration that Reddit has. Now, to quote the author here again, rather than presenting its users with simple chronological feeds or overwhelming them with algorithmic recommendations, it relies heavily on user feedback to rank content in the form of upvotes and downvotes. To a greater extent than most large platforms, Reddit also allows and expects its groups to moderate themselves. Unlike its feed-based peers, it is clearly descended from a smaller, more fragmented era of the web in which people shared interests and enthusiasm and found each other on forums and contributed out of a sense of community. And I think that is 100% correct. If you go back into the 90s, and you remember the internet like I do from there, or even the early 2000s, we had not necessarily a Reddit, but you would join websites that had forums. You could be a car enthusiast, underwater basket weaving enthusiast, whatever it was, and you would share and you would collaborate and you would contribute. And there really wasn't this drive to monetize, everything that we did. Sometimes you flipped the website a couple of bucks. Sometimes they had an advertising engine on there, but it was pretty generic, meaning, okay, we know we're into cars, so we'll get every advertisement from Ford to Chevy to Ferrari, even if you're into Yugos, on that site. And so this is essentially what I think is the core reason why Reddit is essentially committing suicide. You've got a user base that is engaged and they're contributing into things that they are interested about or passionate about or have an opinion about. And yes, sometimes it gets snarky. It can also, kill civility at times as well. But it's also contributing something that the other platforms aren't. And if you start taking that away, if you start disincentivizing those that take from their time, their day, a lot of people have day jobs and they will continuously still log into Reddit to be a moderator, to answer questions, all these kinds of things. You're essentially killing what this is. And quite frankly, it is that bridge between that old style of, internet-based forums, IRCs, like all these kinds of things, and what we consider common or current social media. Think TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, etc. I think that's the bridge that it is. So it's going to appeal to an older generation. It's going to appeal to a younger generation that doesn't get that anywhere else, even though, let's say, the older generations grew up with it. Let's say Gen X, Boomer, and older, experience that. So I think this is essentially that mix. And if Reddit is really going down this road, they're not finding another way to monetize it. That's the problem. And the other side of this, I think, is the fact that if you start messing with your user base, You don't understand your user base. Tumblr fell into this issue as well. Tumblr was one of the major ones, a major competitor of Reddit, and there was a lot of adult content on Tumblr as well. I don't care if you love or hate Tumblr, but the point is there was a lot of adult content on there, and Tumblr decided to essentially go PG rated, saying we're going to remove, all of the adult content from there. Well, there was a huge backlash. They lost something like 90% of their users because, quite frankly, one, it was a free speech thing. Two, they had a massive misunderstanding of essentially what was driving content on their platform. And okay, fine, OnlyFans was supposed to be for celebrities connecting to fans originally, and it turned into adult content as well. And when they tried something like that, the immediate backlash was there. They looked at Tumblr and said, nope, adult content is staying, and OnlyFans continues to grow. Reddit, on the other hand, is going to live and die by those moderators, because those moderators didn't have to go and set up a www.underwaterbasketweavingforum.com. They could simply use Reddit. And if Reddit does not understand that, they do not understand essentially the age and the experience of their users and the desire that their users have to build those communities of like-minded people in a way that they're not going to be aggressively or over-aggressively advertised to or data mined like on a Facebook, you're really missing the boat. So if you essentially are Mr. Hoffman, CEO of Reddit, hear my words here, or if you know him, play him this video or podcast, because I think this is something that is fundamentally missing. You might think that 90% of your users who are not paying for things, are enjoying contributing this for free or whatever it is, or they're standing with you. And I'm telling you, they're not. They're really not. And I'm not an active Reddit contributor. I'm not a moderator. I go to Reddit to read answers. When I Google an oddball question, oftentimes Reddit comes up and there's some really interesting discussions and oftentimes accurate answers. That's the core. If you can't find a way to moderate around that, essentially, or work around that to monetize, then you've got a very serious issue. And basically putting this on your users, even if it's a subset of your users, is going to turn off the other 90% in some way. You are not going to keep 90% of your users. You're going to fall, and you're going to fall hard, and something else is going to come up in its place, and figure that out. Promise me. I promise you that's going to happen. Tumblr is the perfect example. So there you go. That is your news of the day. I just wanted to dive into this because, quite frankly, whether you realize it or not, we're all using Reddit. Whether you have a user there or not, we're all using Reddit by virtue of Google. And if that goes away, Reddit goes away. And there you go. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, but not Reddit. I don't have a forum there, and I don't moderate, but I do occasionally listen. I do occasionally read. Also, subscribe to me at YouTube as well. Hit that bell. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.